peoples, what's up? Or in Spanish, hola, que pasa, mi gente?
Yeah!
Hey, welcome to the panel of Latino and Latina content creators in gaming. I did this in Black History Month. I did this for Black content creators, and it was so warm and it was so beautiful to see people in their cultures talking about themselves, talking about how they are in gaming. I want to do it again. And I was talking with Roberto and Jazz privately. We were like, let's do this. And like, you know what? Let's just blow it out. And let's just invite a lot of people from a lot of different places all over. A little bit Puerto Riqueño leaning over there, but that's okay. In fact, the Puerto Ricans are in the middle row. I don't know how that happened, but but we have people from all over Latin America, Mexico, and different places. So we are going to share do the same thing we did in that context with the Black creators, but our experience is a lot different. So we are very excited to share with you our experiences in this panel. So before I get to my first big question, I'm going to ask for some brief introductions, and I'm going to go from the bottom up. So I'm going to go from Dereck, and then we're going to go back around. So Dereck, please introduce yourself and your channel, and away we go.
Hey everyone, hi, this is Dereck, and well, my channel, it's a Solo BG podcast, which of course is not a YouTube channel, it's a podcast, which is a stream basically in all streaming platforms that audio can be accessed through, and basically my content focus in solo and cooperative board games. So yeah, and also I do 2 episodes per month for basically the same concept, but in Spanish, which is called Solo BG Podcast en Español, where over there I share microphones with my good friend El Chino, which he's also from Mexico, like I am. And we both are based here in US. So we both talk about games, solo board games, not non-solo games. And yeah, that's basically where I come from. And I'm very happy to be here with all of these amazing people that at least I can see through the screen, because of these chaotic times. And the only other way that I could think is probably if we were all able to meet in a convention or something. But at least we are here with technology.
We're doing the best that we can over here with the Zoom
of course.
Call. So
yeah,
all
sure.
right. So I'm gonna go to. There you go. Thank you very much, Dereck. For seeing your face for the first time, you've been on my podcast a couple of times, but Zoom, baby, making it happen. All right. So a man with a video show. He is Roberto. He is from Sheer Boredom. Tell us about your channel and what you're up to.
I'm Roberto, like Jason just said. Thank you for having me on. I'm a hairstylist, and it all started last year when I was home. I needed that little fixed one-on-one time with people, so I started Sheer Boredom. So now I talk to content creators, publishers, all sorts of people, personalities, and I throw them up on YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube at Sheer Boredom Table Talk.
All right. In the middle, occupying the Whoopi Goldberg spot of our little family over here, from Cuacalope, or Spanish language is Cuacalope, launching a double channel just like Dereck is doing. It is Jan. Jan, introduce yourself to the peoples.
¿Qué es la que hay, mi gente? Como dijo Jason, my name is Jan Bigas. I am co-host of Cuacalope and then main host in Cuacalope. I'm de Puerto Rico, lived there all my life, and decided to move later to Washington, D.C. about 5 to 6 years ago. I lose count already. But
it's probably 8. That's what our brain does.
Yeah, it's probably, yeah.
the years disappear.
No, pero pues sí, I guess we'll go into this later, but I'm so happy to be here with so many amazing content creators de Latinoamérica, which I unfortunately don't see enough of aquí in DC. So I'm just very, very happy to get to meet everybody today.
We're fixing that right now. We are fixing that. People will, because I see that thing, it's like, okay, how many of y'all really out there?
Un montón. We're everywhere.
Yeah. I could have done this like 2-3 times over, honestly. So, but these are not. Thank you very much for everybody who agreed to come on. All right, Jazz. Jazz, also de Puerto Rico, is from the Lobby of Hobbies YouTube channel. Go ahead and tell the people's introduce yourself.
How's it going? My name is Jazz from the Lobby of Hobbies, where our idea is enter, share, and discover. And we just pretty much want to just bring the hobby of board games and just expand the content. We started off as a small podcast originally, me and my buddy Judge, who is an African-American who is heavy into video games. So that's kind of where the idea of hobbies just came into play. And we wanted to bridge the gap from people who are in other hobbies but don't know about the hobbies that we do. But so unfortunately, he has had to transition because he is a music producer. So he's kind of had to go full-fledged into that, which has now brought me to YouTube, which is not my forte, I would say, but I'm getting comfortable.
You would never tell about that camera, my friend. That's a good look. You good looking over there. You got that blur in the background.
Listen, if I told you how old my camera was, you'd be surprised. All right.
Oh.
I think my camera's probably pushing like 14 years old here.
That's why it's blurry.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's why it's blurry. But it's pretty much that's the idea. It's just to introduce this hobby and just hobbies in general, right? And trying to bridge the gap from people from all different hobbies, all different walks of life is what our vision. That's what I want to do. So, if you're on board with us, hey, listen, join the community. We want you guys to be a part of it. But yeah, I'm glad to be on this, Jason. I'm happy with everything that you're doing. I'm loving the content. Thank you. Let's get going. I'm getting ready for this talk.
Thank you. All right, Annette, we are going to hop over to you next. Annette is I'm not going to say old head, but because, Annette has a youthful spirit, but Nettersplays has been around a couple of years on the Dice Tower and other places. So in case people don't know, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Annette. I'm also known as Netters. I go by Nettersplays on all my channels. It's been a while. It's been like a year since the pandemic started, where I kind of stopped and refocused my energy towards like my work and, mental health and everything. So it's been a while. I want to get back into it, but you can still follow my content like on Instagram and Twitter and such and Facebook. So I still post images, and I'm also part of the American Tabletop Awards, which just recently announced their awards. I'm missing one game.
There it is.
But I'm missing the crew, but these are the winners for the 3 out of the 4 categories. So I'm still a part of the community, but I wish, this whole pandemic can go away so we can eventually meet at the table again. And so I could produce more content as well.
Paused but not forgotten. You were one of the first people I thought of when I thought of this idea when Jazz and Roberto were talking. And also, if you follow her, you'll see the bird.
Yeah. He's kind of quiet right now, so I'll leave him there.
We're going to be here long enough. We're going to hear from it at some point.
Yeah, you
guaranteed. Last and certainly not least, Estefania Rodriguez. She is. I don't believe you are a regular content creator, but you are a game creator, so you fit right in here. The person without the games in the shelf is going to be the designer, the one with like the crafting and all that kind of stuff in the background. So please introduce yourself and a couple of your projects. How we could be familiarized with yourself.
All right. So yeah, thank you for having me, by the way. I really appreciated being part of here. And my name is Estefania Rodriguez. I am Argentinian.
No relation to Dereck, by the way. We got to...
Probably long lost cousin, I would say.
Yeah, when you have like 12 total last names among the people, you have to clarify that a lot.
Siempre primo, una tía, un tío, otro qué sé yo.
Probablemente nos conocemos por ahí por algún lado, algunos antepasados o algo.
Probably.
Go back a little bit.
Yeah, so like Jason said, I'm a game designer. I'm currently working on PopCats Fighter, which is a card fighting game. I'm also working on a couple more games that I haven't really announced too much. I'm also an art producer for Funko Games, so it's exciting. And I'm also a moderator for Seattle's playtesting group digitally, on Discord and stuff like that.
So you're in Seattle right now?
No, I am not in Seattle. I'm in Las Vegas, but I will be in Seattle actually by summertime, like little late summer.
All right, so we have a big cross section of folks, and I really can't wait. I definitely hear some feedback that a lot of the people's favorite part of this panel is hearing the personal stories. So, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go around and I'm going to ask everybody kind of in turn, briefly as much as you can. We get into it and it's like, all that kind of thing. But, so where are you from? If you're born in America, you're born in a home country, and how you got into gaming in the context of your family or your familial unit. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to start with Jan.
Anda, okay. La presión. Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm Puerto Rican. I was born in Puerto Rico, and actually my mother is Cuban and my father is Puerto Riqueño. And I've lived in this interstice between multiple cultures simultaneously across all my life. My grandparents actually escaped Cuba when things were going down in Cuba. And so they went to live in the United States for a little bit and got very enamored with the type of liberties and culture that was there. So when they came into Puerto Rico, I started, learning tanto Cuban traditions, like Puerto Rican traditions, and also American traditions. So there was a lot. It was a very mixed experience for me, which kind of puts me away from the traditional Puerto Riqueño mindset in a lot of ways because of all these colliding views of the world. So from there, my family was never into games. Nunca. I was the only geek in the family. We used to play video games and be into Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And my entire family would look at me like, "¿Cuándo tú vas a crecer, mijo? ¿Qué pasa? Where are you gonna grow up? Come on. Like, you can't be doing." I remember my grandma, like I was like 17 or 18, and I was like, I don't know, watching a Pokemon series or doing games, and she looks at me and she's like, "¿Tú no ibas a dejar esto ya? Like, pasaron ya los años. ¿Qué pasó?" So my entire life, I was always the geek. Always, always, always. And it wasn't until one of my really good friends from Puerto Rico introduced me to a game called HeroClix that I discovered what board gaming was. And I actually did this way down the line. I know I remembered Life and Monopoly, and I would look for any excuse to play those games, pero nadie en mi familia wanted to. So eventually I got into HeroClix. My friends started getting into board games, and now I'm here doing this full time, or trying to do it full time as best as I can.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much, Jan. I'm actually going to split up the Puerto Ricanos, where there's a lot of, that's also my cultural background. And I get to actually share a little bit about my cultural background. We'll save that. But I'm going to go to Estefania. Please share a little bit about your background and how you, in your family context, got into gaming.
So I was born and raised in Argentina. So when I was about, when I was about 12 years old, we moved to Miami.
You speak way better Spanish than we do down in Puerto Rico.
No sé, la verdad que ya tantos años que no estoy en Argentina que el español ya a veces no está lo mismo.
Me pasa lo mismo.
Not the same anymore.
All the time.
Yeah.
Code switching, difficult to do.
Right.
Very absolutely. Mm-hmm. I was born in Argentina, about 12, 13 years old. I moved to Miami. My mother was born in United States and my dad was born in Argentina. My grandparents are Argentinian, so I have very little American, in my opinion, because it's just my mom born here, although she was raised, which is why we moved to Miami, because that's where she was from. And then as far as gaming, I've played games all my life, but I played video games the most when I was little. So like my first console was like PlayStation, and then my first board games are the same ones as everyone else, basically.
Their first console Monopoly. Was PlayStation. Listen to that.
Yeah,
it was. That was like my 17th.
Clue, all that kind of stuff. So I have those kind of things, but I really didn't get into board gaming until college, and then I kind of dropped off because life happened, and I picked it up again a couple of years ago with my game design. Like that's how I started playing again, because I wanted to design a game, and that's basically how I got to here.
Okay. All right, we're gonna bounce it back to Roberto. Bring us back to La Isla. Tell us about your family background.
I have quickly. I have a question for Jan. Do you know the difference between, or why the Cuban flag and the Puerto Rican flag resemble each other? Like, because Cuba is white, blue, and white, and Puerto Rico is red, white, and blue.
No,
it's the same. It's the same design.
Yeah, it is. It is exactly the same. That's a good question. I've never actually delved into that. Probably I should.
Okay. All right. So
I know the answer, but I'll post it a little bit, like, because it's short.
A little later.
All right.
Nice. Aprendiendo también. Excellent.
So my dad is a New Yorker. He was born in Manhattan. His parents are Puerto Rican. My mom was born in Puerto Rico, and they met in Massachusetts. So I was actually born and raised in Massachusetts. And growing up, it was a lot of gaming. It was Life, Dominoes, Brisca. We played a lot of card games. But it wasn't until I want to say 2012 where I was cutting someone's hair, and we just hit it off. He was like, "Hey, you want to come over and hang out?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he showed me Carcassonne, and I was like, this is crazy different. And I've been playing that, or just playing board games ever since. But as a kid, my dad would play video games with me. My first console was a Sega Genesis, but I did get Atari and stuff after the fact.
His
My
first
dad
console, Sega Genesis.
Game Boy. Esa fue la mía, Game Boy.
But my dad would play games with me and my mom. My dad worked nights. My mom would play all sorts of games with me too. But it was just something that we did as a family. Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna mix it back up again. Away from La Isla down to Mexico. Dereck, tell us about your family background. So you were not born here in America, I think, right? You were born in Mexico.
Well, before I start, my first console was the first Nintendo, the NES.
The NES.
Yeah. And I remember my dad used to have an Atari. So I remember playing a little bit with the Atari. I'm not that old. I'm from 1986. So I still consider myself a young fella. But yeah, so my background comes, it's a little bit weird because I was born in Mexico, but I have the dual citizenship. And where I came from, that's very common. I came from a small town in Mexico at the border with United States, literally at the southeast corner of the country here in US. It's called Matamoros, Tamaulipas, and it's bordered with Brownsville, Texas. It's by the ocean. It's very warm. It's beautiful. It's very tropical, I guess. And I was born there. I was raised, all my education, I did it in Matamoros, all the way up to college. I'm a physician. I graduated from there. Then I started working in Brownsville, Texas, in a heart clinic. And while I was there, like I said, I never was into board games or anything. Of course, growing up, I mean, I have memories of, with my family, with my two brothers, playing Monopoly, like, probably most of all of us started. And it's funny because, I will make a parenthesis here. Like nowadays with our gaming libraries, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the weird one or the only one that we sleeve our cards, and when we put up a game, and when we're putting it back to the box, we accommodate every single little piece in Ziploc box. Some of us label those Ziploc box. Some of us buy our trays and whatever. And thinking back, actually, I was talking with my wife recently. When we used to play, I remember Monopoly or any other game, we would just put everything, toss it back to the box, and it was all messed up, and you will be losing some, I don't know, pieces, and you wouldn't care. But nowadays, of course, is way different. But anyway,
it has 3 draw 2s and 2 skips. It's all good. It still works.
We can make it work. And fun fact, we're talking about Monopoly. I just recently watched a video. I think it was from Rodney Smith. That it clarified to me that I've been playing Monopoly all wrong, at least back on the days. But anyway, after that, when I was working in the heart clinic, I saw one of my friends coming with a big tackle box, like, fishing box, huge. And I love fishing. I grew up by fishing by the oceans, going to fishing tournaments with my dad and my brothers. So when I saw him, and of course, this is a white folk. He was from, I think, somewhere here in the Midwest, but he was down in Texas. So when I saw him, I was like, "Hey, Jared, so you like fishing?" And he's like, "Nope." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I saw you caught dead fishing. Yeah, I saw him with the tackle box, and I was like, "Cool, this is the way that we can bond. Have a interracial cool friendship or whatever." And I was like, "Cool, let's go fishing." He's like, "No, I don't fish." And I was like, "Okay." And then he asked for a day off on the clinic, and I was like, "Oh, well, are you going somewhere with your tackle box?" He's like, "Well, I'm actually gonna go with one of my friends because we both like Star Wars, and we're gonna share some chips that we have here." And I was like, "Oh, can I see?" So then he started showing me, and he was talking about X-Wing, the miniatures game that was back in 2015. And I told him, "You know what? I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well. For me, it's DC and Star Wars, so that's the whole thing. And I would really, if you invite me over, I would like to go and watch." And that was it. I started to play X-Wing miniatures game. Since then, with him, I remember my innocent memory thinking, "Oh, I'm just gonna buy one expansion or two. It's too expensive, $12 each. I mean, there's no way that I can spend like he does, like $1,000 in one game." Like, I was innocent back then. And I started to play. Then the life took me to Fargo, North Dakota, to work in a hospital there. And as soon as I got there, or even before I got there, actually, I started Facebook, trying to search through Facebook to X-Wing miniatures gaming groups over there. And I started to meet some people that were there. Then life brought me to Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where I live currently. And
right next to Gen Con. We didn't notice that. Right next to Gen Con.
And even my wife asked me right now, like, "Did you do it on purpose?" And I'm like, "No, I started you." Like, the offer came by
happy coincidence.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
And so,
¿Qué se le va a hacer?
¿Qué se le va a hacer? Sí, caímos aquí, pues bueno, felices de estar aquí, ¿no? Y pues aquí está el Gen Con y Origins 2 hours away, and it's great. Unfortunately, COVID times right now, it's kind of, difficult, even if the
back.
conventions
We're
is
just
going to
coming
happen.
Dios te
But-
escuche.
Yeah. But anyway, I landed up here. And then just lastly, before I finish, I met a good friend of mine, that he actually introduced me to board games more in depth. And I remember him telling me on a couple of days night, he was like, you know what? I play board games solo. And I was like, this is that crazy. The first thing that came to my mind, it was like, okay, this guy lay out the Monopoly or whatever, start to make runs around the table and playing like a single each player and whatever. And then he explained me, no, let me lend you a game. And he lent me Pathfinder, the card game, the first edition. And I remember going to YouTube and watching Ricky Royal videos, which are fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Ricky Royal. And the next is story. I started to play solo board games like crazy. I started to, get more involved with content creators around YouTube. And then I thought like, well, I don't have a beautiful face, so I might as well do a podcast. And that way nobody has to look at my face and they can just hear my awful accent.
Come on, I want to pinch those cheeks right now.
Yeah, I know. They're okay. But that's my story. Sorry, it took me a little while to bring everything in, but that's Dereck basically, if you were curious about it.
If I invite a bunch of Latinos and Latinas on the channel, I expect to be here a while. The only thing is that we don't have any maduros and amarillitos and all whatever you call them, sweet plantains. That's the only thing that's missing. But we are going to bounce back to La Isla. We're going to bring Jazz back in. Tell us about your background and how you got into gaming within your family context.
So like Jason said, I am Puerto Rican. I was born in Staten Island, New York, and my parents were born in the Bronx.
What was your first gaming console?
Oh, Atari 2600.
Yes.
So I was born in
another old person.
83. I got it. I got that and probably the NES around the same time, I think. But yeah, that's how I started. My mother was a single mother for the first 4 years of my life. Unfortunately, my father got into the wrong lifestyle, and it was my mom working, 2 jobs, working 2 jobs and going to school at the same time, because she didn't have a high school diploma at the time. So she was working 2 jobs at a bank, at a Subway shop, and then she was going to computer school to become a clerk typist. That was where she wanted to. And I want to say I was about 5 years old, right after kindergarten. I graduated kindergarten, and during that time we had family here in New Jersey because my mom was living in New Jersey for a bit. We came down to New Jersey, visited family, and she came across an old high school boyfriend that they were dating prior to him actually leaving off to the military. And long story short, things kind of fell off, not to the fact of them, just the communication. And it's like, oh, I don't know if does he still love me? Does she, so that communication just died off, and they went their separate ways. But they reunited when we were visiting an uncle in Camden, New Jersey, and right next door was this man who is the man that raised me today. That is my father. But we moved to New Jersey, Camden, New Jersey for quite a bit, actually for a year. Right after first grade, my parents decided to move out of the city with little to nothing. A 1987 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. They put the mattresses, they took a couple, put the mattresses right on top, tied that thing down, and it was driving back and forth to a town called, Washington Township here in New Jersey, which is, 100% like Little Italy. We live in not that far from Philly. So they call it, Little South Philly here. So we were one of the first Hispanic, families growing up in that town. And I can only imagine what people thought, us coming into the apartment complex because we couldn't afford a house, coming in with these mattresses tied up. But listen, my parents worked hard. I got into video gaming. That's what I primarily did. And sports. My dad wanted to get me heavily into sports early. And that's what I did. I was a jock growing up. When it came to board games, it was one of those things that if you're at a family party and there's just board games, there was Monopoly, Clue, what else? Like Uno, you just played. And sometimes we didn't even read the rules. We just put it out and we just kind of figured it out as we went along. But it was never a part of our culture. It was one of those things that you would see your family over at the domino table playing, but that wasn't something kids did, right? That was the adults, because in the Puerto Rican culture, their dominoes is serious. Even
That's
spades,
the one you can't put, like Dereck mentioned, you throw everything in the box, not dominoes.
Oh, no.
You got to take that.
Yep. Yes. Let me get each feature's got to go in the right spot in the box and then close that box. And
now we take our dominoes real serious.
But while you grow up in a family that does play dominoes, things like that, and you see people from all ages playing that, you would be surprised why other types of games aren't introduced into the culture. And that was one of my biggest surprises. I got into board gaming, I want to say around I was like, I think 21, 22, where I remember getting together with some friends that I worked with, and we went to a ski trip, and on that board game shelf was like categories, a bunch of party games. I had a great time. When my wife and I met, we got into, hanging out. I was introduced to some of her family, and the first thing I think was, how do I break the ice? And it was just party games. So I just remember the 2 party games that night that I had with my friends, and I went to the store, came back, bought them over, and I was hooked with the idea of the community, the atmosphere there. So I started researching board games. And that was the year, I think, was it 2008 around that time when Pandemic was released? Mm-hmm. So it was either 2008, 2009 when I purchased Pandemic as like it was just off the whim. It's just getting a lot of buzz. Let me just purchase it. So it was on my Christmas list. My wife, who I was dating at the time, purchased it for me. And we played it one night for hours on end, just trying to beat it. Eventually we did. And that was my diving down deep into the rabbit hole, because I didn't know that this hobby existed. I didn't know that it was to that level. Mm-hmm. And I started exploring, and it was over from there. And I took like a little hiatus because I was playing Dice Masters heavily, like competitively. So, I did have board games in my collection, but I never started to research anything outside of Dice Masters. That's where all my money went to, and where all my store credit from wins went to. But I met a gentleman, Isaac Villa, who runs Gaming with Sidekicks at US Nationals and for Dice Masters. And he said that as the game was dying off, he was going to be getting into more board game content creation. And that kind of made me, let me start venturing what other board games are out there. And that's kind of how I got sucked in. And like I said, this past 2 years is something that I've been wanting to do content creation, but it wasn't until last year I actually had the time to jump into it with the pandemic. So that's where I'm here. That's my brief little life story. I'm sure we'll probably get into start talking more stuff, but yeah, that's me.
No, we're going to get to, believe me. Everybody's scratching that surface. I'm making notes. We're going to come back to some of the things. Annette, we're going to go back to San Francisco, and we're going to talk about your little journey over here.
So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. And I basically was in a non-traditional family. Both my parents were gone out of the picture. And so I was raised by my grandmother and my grandfather, and they pretty much started raising me at the age of 8. So big transitional point in my life where all of a sudden I'm living with my grandparents and aunt and uncles in the household, lots of people around, and also constantly traveling to Mexico, Ensenada, and going to Baja like anytime we could. Whenever there was a 3-day weekend, we were in Mexico. We were in that Oldsmobile as well, and traveling down south across the border and visiting family. I pretty much started kind of connecting with my great grandmother because, she was around, and she pretty much only spoke Spanish, of course, from Mexico. And I spoke English. I understood Spanish. I was learning Spanish more and more. And, but there was a language barrier between us, along with her having hearing impairments as well. So she couldn't hear me. She couldn't understand me. And the only way we really connected was on the table, and we would play parcheesi and Chinese checkers, and we would play cartas. And then we just, communicate and kind of get to know one another. Like, she was my great grandmother, I was her great granddaughter. And so we kind of connected in that way, and that kind of stuck with me. And so that's kind of like my family experience with board gaming and, being raised with not just my present family in the United States or in California, but also going off to Mexico and meeting my other relatives, my foundation there as well. So then after all that, I was introduced into other board games as well as Settlers of Catan when I was living down in Los Angeles. But, you know, it was a game where I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that one along with chess. But it wasn't something that I continued or pursued or anything like that. When it was ever brought up, I was like all about it. But it wasn't until I moved up into San Francisco and I moved into a house with some roommates that had Dominion. And then so they brought out the card game. First day, I was like, I do not understand anything that's going on this table or how to play these cards or why I'm collecting them. I don't understand it, but I kept on going through it. I kept on playing other games as well. And then eventually I went to the board game store and came out of there with a bunch of boxes of games. And that's where it started. So I've been playing games for like, oh gosh, I'm looking at all my shelves. I have like 3 or 4 shelves now full, a long time. So it's been like maybe 6-7 years now, I think. Yeah, maybe even a little longer, but I've been collecting them for quite a while. It also pushed me into like creating content, you know, being a creative mind myself. I just kind of started picking up a camera and just recording my thoughts on these games, you know, and just kind of providing some my other perspective. I wanted to record what I was getting, what I was liking. Acquisitions and impressions was like my original like content that I came out with, which was just a webcam. And I would talk about all the games I would get and give you my first thoughts about them, whether it's good or bad. And that kind of just stuck with me. And so now, you know, I eventually went into like overviews and such and posting pictures and images and thoughts on Instagram and Twitter. So that kind of all just led into this gaming. And I still take my games and I take them to my family members and they love them. So I'm able to like share that with everyone too.
Nice.
What was your first gaming console? I probably should lead off.
That's the most important. Apparently,
That's
that's one of the
important
biggest
one.
questions.
Yeah, sorry.
So I'm gonna try not to date myself, but it will date me. So it's a Nintendo. It's
Okay.
the original OG Nintendo.
I had them all. I had Intellivision. I had ColecoVision.
I had Atari too.
A Commodore 64, where it was Apple IIe. It was all just floating over there. Don't even know how. Like nobody in my family gamed. It was just me.
Yeah.
Jason, just go over there. Just make me happy. Anyway, so just very quickly for me. So I am Puerto Rican by descent. Both my mom and my father were born on the island. Came here very quickly. They were born in the late 40s, early 50s. In the 50s was a program called Operation Bootstrap, which part of which was a lot of migration happened to New York, New Jersey, different port cities, especially New York. So Roberto mentioned his father, I believe it was, a Nuyorican. So I am Nuyorican. That's how I identify myself. And I grew up. Well, when they first came, they were in the barrio. They were in, you know, not the nice neighborhoods, right? And I guess that's what we could afford. And it was at the time, the 60s. It was, you know, just like New York was like run down, and it wasn't a beautiful place to be. But you know, my mom, especially my mom, made the decision to, you know, move to a wider neighborhood for, you know, to get away from the barrio, to give me, you know, speak English primary and, you know, acculturate me into the American context. So what ended up happening was I grew up in a very multicultural space. So I grew up in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. I got the Puerto Ricans, I got the African Americans, I got the Chinese there. Later the Arabs came, later the Ecuadorians, and the other, lots of other people. It's a very revolving door type neighborhood. But I grew up, you know, very American. Culturally, so to speak, but in between, right? And we're gonna talk a lot about that in between. Like I you know, I knew what a chancla was, and I knew what the pain of getting assaulted with a chancla, but which my friends did not know. Like little things like that. So you know, just kind of like existing in an in between space. What am I? And then like Netters was saying, language barrier. So my Spanish is pobre. It's not, I try, you know, every once in a while, but like, you know, you just kind of like, you know, where you are, you know, depending on who's talking, and a lot of English is spoken in the home. So, you know, moving on, I was a video gamer, huge, and I was a solitaire card player. I was very quiet. So like I played a lot of like just like cards. And you know, dominoes and a lot of that stuff was played. So I picked that up. Didn't get into hobby board game until I was in college. And I had a girlfriend who introduced me to Munchkin. Munchkin is, I love that game. Still love that game. Don't play it at higher play accounts, but I still love it. And then, you know, like with Jazz, 2008 comes, I play Pandemic, and, you know, kind of off from there. What I notice about people, and we can kind of move into the discussion portion, but what I notice is there's 7 of us, and very, like, I don't think I heard, we lost something.
Now there's
Roberto,
6 of us.
Now there's 6 of us. Oh no. I think Roberto said he had
Who's
to
next?
go at some point, which is fine. Well, we miss him. Maybe I'll kind of splice him in at the end. But so that was hold on a second. Hold on. Where he is? He's coming. He
tricked us. Is he coming back?
He is coming back.
He tricked us.
Hey, I think he just did it to spite you, Jason.
He wants the attention, I think.
Yeah.
He has that cheap Puerto Rican audio internet.
Coquinet.
He has Coquinet down there.
I didn't want to hear your story. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I know you have to go to, but so just like kind of throw a flag up whenever you have to, whatever to like.
No, my internet kicked me out for a second. I do have
It's
that
a
cheap
cookie
Puerto
net,
Rican
that's
internet. I did. Yeah, I heard it.
Well, so we'll joke about that. I don't know if you say this, Jan, but in our family we call it la brega. La brega is like the struggle for like just basic stuff, you know, like nothing works, and you know the schools close half the time. It's like, I guess it's la brega, so all that kind of thing. Anyway, so we'll make some jokes about that. Anyway, so a comment there thread I heard was like, we're all in hobby gaming, but not really from our families, you know, mostly from our friends, and that kind of reflects, you know, but I don't know, like I think, I mean, on some level we are, you know, kind of foreigners in a strange land, so to speak. Everybody's nodding, so maybe we can kind of start with that sensibility of, you know, we're here, but we didn't, well, you know, we're like, I say like strangers in a strange land, right? I mean, is that a good way to kind of think about how, you know, being Latino in gaming?
I'll jump in. Jan said something important, and I think it struck home with me because one of the first videos that I did on my channel, like I just started doing videos this year, and I did one with my wife, and I think it was like the top 3 reasons that we think content creators are kind of overlooked or underrepresented in the hobby.
That was the first video of yours I saw.
And one of the things that was mentioned was, you know, sometimes like we, in essence, it's almost like there's this cultural disparity, right? This like where my wife was talking about from a woman's perspective, but also from a minority perspective, that sometimes we don't have the time, right? Because we're so busy working. We come from working class societies, and our, you know, we're told from a young age, work hard, because nothing is going to be given to you because of the color of your skin or, you know, where you come from, because you have to work. You can be good, but you have to be twice as good. You know, and I know growing up for me, you know, when we play, I was saying we played Clue, Life, Uno, Parcheesi was one, like Netters was saying, you know, we played those things, but it was to kill time. It wasn't that something that you dedicated time around, because there wasn't enough time to work hard to get to where you needed to be. Like I said, my parents both, my dad's from the military. So just high school diploma. My mom, you know, she wound up going back to school, got her high school diploma, and did some college. They both did some college, but you know, I was the first one in the family to go to college. And it's one of those things that, you know, you have to work hard. You know, I said I was a jock. I played sports growing up, and my dad used to tell me, you know, you're really good. All the coaches are telling me how good you are, and that you're one of the best that they've seen come out of this town. He said, but I want you to know that you can't just be good. You have to be exceedingly better than everyone else. And I didn't really notice that until I got into high school. You know, it was one of those things growing up. It was like, hey, I want Jazz on my team. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school, I remember getting pulled off by the coach, and he pulled me, my one friend, and he said, you two are battling it out with the senior who for this one spot. I have 2 spots left for the starting lineup. It's going to be the DH spot and the first baseman spot. And I need you both to, you know, you're going to get rotating time throughout the preseason. Everybody's going to rotate, and I'm going to have the 2 best guys starting. And my numbers were exceedingly better than the other 2. But I didn't get the first start. It was weird. And that whole junior year, I never got an at bat, right? And I was wondering, what is it that I'm not doing? Is I'm not practicing hard enough? And I just went and said, hey, listen, push me down to the JV team. I just want to play. And I remember my dad pulling me to the side and said, now you see exactly what I was talking about. And even to that point, I was still clouded because, like I said, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. While, growing up, there wasn't many Hispanics. There was more Asians, more Blacks. And, growing up in middle school and elementary school, I remember middle school, probably 6th grade, a kid came to me, he's like, are you Black? I said, no, I'm Spanish. They're like, oh, I said, my last name's Cruz. Isn't that Spanish enough for you to, oh, no, I've never heard that last name. So it was one of those things that people were naive to what they were seeing. And all they knew was they knew I wasn't Asian, and they knew I wasn't, some people might have mistaken me for, Asian in the fact of, coming from India or Pakistan, because we had people from Pakistan, India, things like that. And but I was immediately, if you're Indian, Pakistani, or Black, and Black was the first thing that came to mind. I don't know why that was the first one, but they just did. And that was the first time I really felt the need. And after that year was the first time I was like, you know what, I really need to start. I started branching out. My mind started branching out differently. How do I, make myself rise above everybody? So I decided in the summer, instead of playing with my friends, I'm going to go find a team and play outside of my town, which is the very first year. And that's how I got recruited for college, was from my summer team, because even my senior year, it was something that I would definitely say the color of my skin is something that kind of held me back a little bit. And that's when I first noticed. And, even growing up, sometimes you don't notice. Some people experience it early on in life. For me, it was my junior and senior year. And the friends that I had that were my best friends, I saw them starting to pull away. And for them, I think it was more so they knew that I was in an uncomfortable position. So they didn't know how to address me now. They never had to worry about it before, but I think now they were seeing it and they just didn't know how to address me. So they just went with what made them, with what didn't take them out of their comfort zone. So, and I think that's
what Jan, because you mentioned it a little bit in your thing, where it's like you're playing like these dorky things, and then you were told by your parents, "What are you wasting your time for?"
Exactly.
Right. I felt very resonant with Jazz's story. Did you feel that same resonance?
Bien brutal.
Yep.
While I was growing up, I didn't like sports. I never liked them, but I was pushed to do sports all the time. Actually, tú y yo tenemos like a similar backstory in terms of like quien nos crió, because my mom got separated from my dad at a young age, and then she met my stepdad, and my stepdad is my parental figure, or the man that kind of shaped me into the man I am today. And he was very much into sports. And he was like this big burly dude, and he would always incentivize me to go out partying and do this and do that, because he used to be like a Casanova when he was younger, and all these type of things. And to a certain degree, I think he wanted me to enjoy life in the way that he perceived it.
Okay.
But that was never my life, right? That I never gravitated towards what everybody around me liked. Porque in Puerto Rico, at least for in Ponce, in my context, you were the popular kids if you were playing sports, and if you were going out, hanging out with your friends to the parties, y a los clubes, y a bailar, y todas estas cosas. You were just not considered in that realm if you weren't part of that. Entonces, en adición a eso, la otra cosa that I felt very resonant with you was that mi mamá, mi mamá increíble, pero she did incentivize me and push me to always be the best in my studies, porque eso era, that was like the area that I could be. Era como que tienes que estar en la A, tienes que estar al máximo, tienes que ser el tope de tu clase, lo más que tú puedas, dale ya tu ave que va a hacerlo, because she used to be valedictorian when she was a kid. Okay. And this, I think, I've never really sat down to process these feelings and the origins of these behaviors, but it's probably due that my grandfather actually never finished school, because in Cuba, they took him out de la escuela so he can work on the farm. And my grandpa in Cuba actually came from a really good and a stable family, but they put him to work. They valued work at those times over that education. Entonces mi abuelo, really worked on it. And it's tried to teach both my tío and my mom, study. You need to study. You need to make something with your life. And anything that fell outside of that spectrum was always seen with a little bit of reprehension or just negativity. You know, that clout was always there.
Yeah.
So when I started getting more into board games, I was also in college or just starting into college. And you always used to video game. And I remember my parents always criticizing my video gaming habits. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, he's going to college. He's getting an architecture degree. We're going to be good. And then suddenly I become more of a geek than I ever was before. By now jumping into board games and also video gaming, like doing all of the above. So it's this really interesting dichotomy because to a certain point, I remember nobody ever verbalized this, but I did feel it. I was like the opposite of the, what do you call it? I was like the star kid in my family. Like I was the kid that everybody put their hopes into. And I was like, oh, he's going to make it. He's going to be super successful. He's going to make money on bank. He's going to be great. And then I felt that pressure across my entire college degree or my entire college time where I needed to graduate from being an architect. But here's the secret. I hated architecture from like the first year, second year. I remember calling my teacher crying, saying, I'm not good enough for this. This is not for me. And everybody que me recuerda lo que tú dijiste, and all my teachers saying, no, Jan, you got talent. You got to keep pushing. You got to keep going. And again, the same story. You can't look for what you want. You just got to be the best at this thing that was in a way kind of like artificially imposed on you. No, you got to keep going. And so it's been a struggle to sometimes, and there's always like this internal guilt for me where I could have been like that. I could have been el nieto that everybody was proud of. Y como que, el arquitecto, Jan Villa, con su dinero, viviendo en Los Angeles, y qué sé yo. And now I'm not that anymore. And I'm never going to be that. Y yo me acuerdo que I remember very clearly that when my grandma was like enfermita and like en el proceso de pues, unfortunately like pass away, ese guilt came even more forward. And I remember like repressing those wants. I was in a band actually cuando yo estaba en high school. From high school to college, I was in a rock band. I was the lead singer of the rock band and I absolutely loved my band. I left my band because my grandma teased me about it too much. And I remember that I didn't want to disappoint her and that I didn't want to disappoint my family. And I left it. And that's the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. I didn't listen to myself. I listened to somebody else. So now that I'm back in gaming and now that it's the first time in my life that I'm embracing my geekdom to a certain degree. I've never had that before. And it's the sense of community that geekdom and board gaming brings you that has helped me kind of make that realization. But with that said, there was another point that, as you were talking about, made me kind of reminisce a little bit on my side.
Actually, I have a couple of points. I just want to get everybody.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I have a couple of points that I wanted to highlight. So number one, like we talk about, like, okay, our families didn't really get us into hobby gaming. It's actually not just that. It's like our families put a lot of pressure on us, and because a lot of us are, a first or second generation immigrant. And we don't, you come to this country and you don't get, it's not like you kind of, enter in that high space, like, you're starting from the bottom rung. And, I definitely, like all of us, I think on some level, I saw a lot of nodding, resonated with that idea of like, okay, there's a lot of us on us, to kind of like get to that next level. And that's an active kind of push away from something like a hobby game. And the second thing, and this is a little bit of a funny thing. So I was, again, I think it was Jazz, you said that you're the first person that went to college in your family. So was I. Yeah. And I got into a couple of decent colleges, including for graduate school, I got into Yale. And I was, telling that was my first thing. And I went to my grandma. My grandma speaks no English. And I told her, it's like, okay, you're going, I was like, I got accepted at Yale. And she's like, oh, really? Me papi going to jail? I'm like, and that got around me, papi going to jail. It's so exciting. It's like, no, I'm not going to jail. but it was that, and it became like a thing. It's like, wow, this is a person. So it's like, okay, then there's that, but that's the fun side. But then there's the downside of like, okay, well, and then I went to like a city school for my college. Like, what happened? And so there's that little like kind of thing there. So I wanted to, introduce some other people. Dereck, did you, you have a different experience, like, but you did go to college and you did kind of go up. Did you feel that same kind of thing on, from your family area?
Well, of course, like I was just listening to Jazz and Jan's stories, and it makes me think a lot because right now in these chaotic times that we're living, of course, here in the United States, with a lot of movements coming up, like Black Lives Matters and all these social, I will call social movement coming up front, which I think that they're very positive. It makes me think that for me, I didn't experience that part of it just because I didn't. Even if I grew up in U.S. in Brownsville, Texas, it was more like, Brownsville. I always call it like it's like Mexico.
Yeah,
like
it's
90% of the population, we speak Spanish over there. With my family, it's Spanish all the time. With my friends, it's all Spanish all the time. I didn't start to actually practice my English until I moved to Indianapolis, and most of my friends are white. So it's like now I was forced to evolve in my English, and that's why my accent is so strong and so awful, and that's why I'm still struggling with English, just because even if I knew it before, like the basics, I never start to talk in English until probably 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, those stories really make me think. I had that pressure, of course, on my family side, like, like, hey, you have to, your older brother, which is only like 2 years and a half apart from me, he already got accepted in medical school, so you need to be a doctor as well. So and I relate a lot of with Jan story about if you, back where I came from, if you were not in the clubs, if you were not in sports, if you were not driving the car around and whatever, you will be the loser. So I also tease my friends and joke about it, which I hope is not and please don't take it as a negative joke, it's probably language barrier, but I was like a closet geek. I never came out of the closet being a geek or enjoying comics, which I actually love. I remember reading comics, like, secretly and whatever. Not so much for my family, more about my friends. I didn't want them to know that, hey, this Dereck is reading comics, or Dereck, is one always wanted to play D&D, even if he didn't knew what it was back in the day, or Dereck is always playing Zelda or whatever on the video games, because even if he was already like 16, 17 year old, because of course the society was pushing you to be this Casanova type of guy, regardless of if you look physically good or not. I mean, you had to be trying to aim for those situations. So in that part of my life, I can't relate. Unfortunately, as a growing up and feeling any type of pushback from the society because of the color of my skin, of my accent, not really. It wasn't until recently, once I moved here towards the Midwest, that in some aspects outside of the board gaming industry, I start to feel or start to hear some comments just because of the color of my skin, just because of where I came from, just because of my accent. And honestly, you will be surprised. Like here in Indiana, for example, I love the state. I love the city. I'm a huge sports fan. I don't practice sports, of course, as you can tell. But
I make no assumptions. You could be the world's best rugby player. Who knows?
I love to eat. You can see that as well. So I don't practice too much sports anyway. But I can tell, like, when you go to those small towns, especially outside of Indianapolis, those Indiana Midwest small towns, I have experienced things like, going into the grocery store and talking to my wife in Spanish, and somebody else will make I don't have any afraid to say like some racist comments towards you. They will say like, andale, like move, whatever, like, or go back to your country, or what are you doing this? And, sometimes I reply like, well, this is my country. Where do you want me to go? But things like that. Now, regarding the board gaming industry, if you ask me if I have felt any kind of pushback, I feel like indirectly, and I don't know if all of you guys can relate, but indirectly, I feel like it's been harder for us as a content creators, or as some sort of creators for the industry. Like in this case, Estefania, she's a designer and a producer. I think it was for Funko.
Art producer.
Yeah. So I mean, at least on the content creator side, I feel like sometimes you get some sort of pushback, even if it's a little, just because you're not the classic white Midwest guy that create content. But at the same time, I think that's very positive and push us to do something different, because of course I'm not going to mention names, but the big channels, the most famous channels, the big content creators at this point, and I know for a fact they do what they do because they have also some income reimbursement, right? Like they basically live from doing that, versus most of us that we're doing this for love, and we know that we had to double our efforts because probably our audiences will be way lower, because once again, you were mentioning, I don't remember who was mentioning before, but this industry is predominantly by white folks, and that's fine. I mean, it's nothing against them. That's what it is, and that's
fine. Like
that's fine. That's
fine. It's
perfectly
just
fine.
this is not about like, oh, you're doing bad or you're doing good. This is just kind of getting
Exactly.
lay of the land.
Yeah,
this is what it is, and we have to deal with what we deal with. There is no attacking. There is no whatever.
Sure.
It just is what it is.
It is what it is, and it's fine. And we like it that way, and that's why we love this hobby so much. But at the same time, it makes you think, or at least on my end, that I have to double efforts and try to offer something different just to be able, to prove ourselves like, hey, the Hispanic guys, just like everybody else, we can enjoy this hobby, and we can also be very creative. We can produce even with our color of the skin, even with in my case, with this awful accent, and so on and so forth. So
you're so stigmatizing towards yourself.
Hey,
we love you.
Because
love
I'm
you.
hearing everybody else. I'm hearing Jan here. Jan talks perfectly English.
No. Eso no iba a decir. I was going to tell you that
Yeah.
I take a little bit of ¿cómo se dice? I don't like hearing you insult your accent, because I've always wanted to have an accent like that when I speak English. I'm not even joking. Like
Okay.
as I've
Beautiful.
grown up, I was going to bring this up, and I'm not going to take away from Derek's conversation, but
No, sure,
I've
go
always
for it.
been like the white passing dude. And that pisses me off, because I've had people say, you're Latino? Sure, but you're not Latino enough, right? Eso a mí me endiabla, because who the hell are you to say what a Latino looks like, or who they are, how they talk, or how they behave, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
So I've always wanted to have un acento that makes me feel closer to home. Like, honestamente, it's something.
Yeah.
So when you say, my horrible accent, no, horrible, it's beautiful. What are you even talking about? Like, hermoso.
I think it's because, like I said, I hear you guys, and you're like very fluent in all of it. And I feel like even to pronounce certain words for me, like super strong. I had to and I don't do it on purpose. I mean, I try to, soften it a little bit and whatever. And I have tried to improve as well on that, especially because my content comes from audio mainly. But it's hard. It's hard.
You gotta
sometimes.
embrace it, though. You gotta embrace yourself.
That's what
like
this panel is all about, is embracing the difference, because there is that pull to assimilate. There's that pull to make us sound, well, like everybody else and everything. And I this is a little bit of a push against that, because this is something where I want to embrace difference and embrace, the salad bowl rather than the melting pot. But I wanted to go to Estefania because obviously, like, because of your position, art director and game designer, like, you might be experiencing things from a much different perspective than we are. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about, like, do you feel that pressure to kind of like do better in a way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a, at least for myself, I've always switched back and forth as far as who I feel I am. So when I left, and it's going a little bit further back, but when I left Argentina, I went to Miami. In Miami, I was from Argentina. So like I was a Latin person, right? So I was never considered too Latin because it was far away. And because I'm kind of lighter than the average Latin person, I'm like, oh, you're kind of American. And I learned English from very young because my mom was from New Jersey, right? So I had to have that English. But when I go back to Argentina, I'm from Miami. I'm from the United States because you speak English. So that's always kind of been the thing. So when I was in Miami, I hated my accent. And I tried so hard to like not acknowledge it. I tried so hard to not have it. And then as I got older, I was like, well, I have to just embrace my accent. Like, it's just the way I am. And I feel like as I started to get older, I went to college. I'm not the first one to go to college. My grandpa did go to college and he graduated. He was an architect. I feel that from that, I've always not fit in anywhere and always been the spicy of Latin, like that one like little speck of Latin in this whole world. because I kind of don't, I feel like I don't fit in any group. But again, so when I was younger, that kind of bothered me. But as I'm older, I kind of like being from Argentina. I like being that I got raised in Miami. I like that I have an accent that sometimes I kind of don't, or it's softer anyway. But even in the game industry, I definitely see how other people perceive me as being Latin, but I don't remember that. If that makes sense, like I don't remember I'm Latin because I don't see myself as anything than myself. But when I'm in like, you know, all these other places, I feel like I don't see other Latin people. Like it's super hard to see others like me. So I don't even know if I answered your question at this point. I feel like
no, I mean, because we're talking about, we're getting into the meat of the discussion, which is kind of the in-between. You know, a lot of us talked about like, it's, so it depends on where you are, right? I mean, you're in these, you have your foot in multiple spaces, and therefore you don't really have your foot in any space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you know, like, and so in my case, I am, you know, Puerto Rican, and I am, you know, darker skinned. I do stick out relative to, I've gotten some of the S words. If you don't know what the S word is, you know, go ahead and look up Urban Dictionary for a Latin person. Gotten a little bit of that, but, you know, so I'm called that, but then at the other side, you know, actually I have the experience of being called a coconut, on my family. A coconut is brown skin, but white inside. So
I had all kinds of stuff too in school. I remember Oreos. I remember Twinkies, like all kinds of stuff for like, not just me, but like for my friends. Because in Miami, there's every single, you know, country, and not just Latin countries, but European countries. So there's all that kind of stuff. And I've heard all the terms. I've had all the terms said to me by people from my own country, like people from Argentina, you know, like it's all kinds of stuff that you grew up with. It's
racism isn't just a white person province, believe me.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely
if you
not.
don't belong, if you don't have 2 feet firmly planted somewhere, then, you know, that culture will make you feel it.
Oh, yeah.
Netters, you were talking a little bit about like a language barrier. I assume that you have some experience with that kind of like in-betweenness.
Yeah, like I think I speak Spanish pretty well, but when I go to Mexico, they say otherwise. And so I always ran up against that, but yeah, like language is a big barrier, especially like when I bring games over to families and stuff. I have to curate which games I will bring and introduce them because it's such a sensitive subject sometimes, where I bring a word-based game, like Just One. It's such a great game, but it just didn't click for my family because you have to write the word down, and everyone doesn't know how to write completely like well, like English is not their first language. And then a lot of laughter comes out of it. People get embarrassed, pride, egos get hurt. So it's like something I just don't even bring to families because it's such a big emotional thing. You're trying to have fun, but not be laughed at either. So, and it's just because you miswrote a word or something. So that's like the language barrier that, you know, a lot of families that speak both Spanish and English have to confront, you know, whenever you bring games around. But also like, I also wanted to resonate with the rest of everyone with regards to just feeling like, I don't know, like the representation part and just like the culture and stuff. I wanted to just kind of also highlight the fact that a lot of representation is not done by Latinos. It's also done by a lot of like European designers and such, and their idea of what Latinos are. And it's just based on the history that not anything that we wrote, but it's also the history that Europeans wrote. And so with that, it's not representing completely like the full picture of what Latinos are, which is a lot different because we are very passionate people. We have a lot of passion in our food. We have a lot of passion in our art and our dance and our song and a lot of different things. And yet like, that's what, you know, defines us, and that's what creates us. Yet we're seen as like, you know, Aztec cultures that are being conquered by Europeans, and, you know, how will they survive this, you know, outcome or whatever. And it's like, yeah, we have that tragic history, and I really don't like playing that all the time. And it's like the only form of history and the only form of association that we have, that's representing us. But that's not true. There's so much more of us. And it's, so it's displayed in the game. It's also displayed in, like, there's not that many Latino like designers, which I'm, Estefania, like, totally, like, I appreciate like you entering into this field and like bringing that kind of representation that is much needed into this community. And as well as us, like, going to conventions and such, like, I don't see a lot of Latinos around, and this past year, like, it's been hard for everyone, but then it's even more harder for us. Like, okay, now when the conventions do open, like, are we still going to see the same thing, which is much less representation.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming forward, like, we need to like come forward and bring our friends along, bring more people into these communities, because that's what I want to see. I don't want to see like, Estefania, like you're saying, like, you don't see yourself as anyone but yourself, but yet others see you as Latina, someone different. And I want to break that barrier, because I don't want to be seen as anyone different than myself, even though I am a form of a representation of a community and a culture,
Mm-hmm.
but still, like, I want to see more of us around, and it's so hard to break that kind of barrier too.
Right.
And one thing that I wanted to, go ahead, Estefania.
No, go.
One thing that I wanted to mention, and it's just something that kind of really annoys me when I talk to my friends that are in board gaming. Board gaming has always felt like a hobby that has invited me, especially like coming from the place that everybody references, Jesse references all the time, is Labyrinth Games and Puzzles here in DC. I had never felt that type of just like open doors, open table, come and sit down. However, I don't know if people take a second when they're in their board game nights, or they take a second during their board game days or their conventions, and instead of focusing on the table, they look up and just look around a little bit, because I can promise you will not see a lot of diversity in that. And that's not anyone's fault specifically, but algunas veces if you're not just completely focused on the game and you take a second to kind of like get the lay of the land, you'll
Mm-hmm.
notice it immediately. And when a lot of people criticize the fact that we speak up about these things, the first thing they say is like, oh no, board gaming is super inclusive. What are you talking about? Everybody's welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then when you look up, how many people can you see? Why aren't there more? And that's the question that if you get offended by us saying like we don't see other Latinos in the space, it's not a question towards us. It's a question more around the space and the community as to why there aren't
Mm-hmm.
more people here.
So
it's just
multicultural spaces don't just happen. It isn't
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, we're going to throw the doors open. It matters who's holding the door. It matters what they see, when they come in. Like, we just talked about in our families, our families aren't like helping us, because there's all sorts of stuff going on, middle class, working class families, and, a lot of single parents I'm hearing, single parents or grandparents. And I always, and among Latinos, we talk about family bramble, not necessarily family tree. It's just unfortunate reality. And so like our families are, a blessing and a curse when it comes to this stuff. So then when we get to the gaming space, we're coming generally on our own, and, kind of blazing a trail. And like, what are we seeing when we get there? It's not bad, but is it actively inclusive? Is it, are there things that are just like annoying, like I'm not going to sit there and say like, a game that is about Aztec this or whatever is like terrible or anything, but it's annoying. I don't really want to deal with, all that stuff coming in there. So yeah, no, that this is, just to kind of come off the point of like, it takes work, and it takes the processing of voices, and we can't just sit there and go, no politics, and, no, stop talking about race, identity politics. Like, if you truly want a multicultural space, you have to open that door. Sorry.
And I have to say, I have a comment actually with what Jan was talking a little bit. Like in my experience, like what I was talking before a little bit is it comes more from the content creator side of the industry, how it is, but also at the same time, I think one very positive thing from our hobby, and I try to praise it every time that, I record an episode, is like, once again, in my experience, and I guess it's like in every culture, we have very good people, very nice people, and we have people that unfortunately that are not very nice or good, right? In every culture, you can call it Mexicanos, Colombianos, Argentinos, Puerto Ricanos, Brasileños, United States, England, whatever. I'm pretty sure like we, in all cultures, we have those scenarios. But for example, in my case, with the gaming groups that I have here in Indianapolis, one of the aspects of why I love the hobby is because, and I don't have any afraid to say, like, I have 3 gaming groups right now, and in all of them I'm the only Mexican and the only one that is different, because all of them are white. And even one gaming group, it's close to 55 to 60 people, and in that gaming group of 55 to 60 people, it's only one person that one time made an unfortunate comment, which even that, I don't think he made it like with that, evilness, I guess, if you want to call it. I guess it was more ignorance. But everybody else, that is what they have all treated me like great. Even one guy that I went into, this is a fun story, like that they invited me to the gaming group. There's a social app that it's called Neighborhood, right? So when I moved here just to Indianapolis, I download the app and I'd say like, hey, my wife and I, we just moved to a neighborhood. We'd love to play games. And one random guy invited me to his house because he was going to have a gaming day. So here I am. I remember texting my wife like, hey, I will give you the address just in case if I don't come back alive, you know where to look for me and stuff. Because I didn't knew any of those people. So I go there, and to my surprise, I go to a basement, and it was like 20. This was before COVID, like 20 white guys that they were playing games. They saw me and they were like, hey, come join us and everything. And it was great. So I think that's also, like, with all that, for example, Jan was mentioning right now, I think it's also worth it to point that at the same time, I think with a little bit of effort, and even honestly, like just a little bit, we can make this hobby even more beautiful in the multicultural aspect. Because once again, and this is my experience, I haven't had that much pushback on the gaming aspect because of my colored skin, of my accent, or anything like that. All the contrary, I think this hobby is beautiful, and that's why I love him at the end of the day. But so yeah, I just wanted to throw that opinion over there, that even if I think it will take us just a little bit of more effort to go to conventional together, or probably, who knows, probably Jason, you can start like a Latino gaming group, and we can start together and something, and but yeah, anyway, I wanted to throw it out there.
Roberto texted, it is Cookie Net. Cookie is a Puerto Rican thing. Está la brega. But we love you, Roberto. I was so looking forward to having you share in this conversation, but this will definitely not be the last conversation of these types that I'll have. Anyway, so I wanted to bring Jazz back in there just to kind of respond, but just making sure we hear from everybody. Go ahead, Jazz.
Yeah, I think, everybody, made some solid points. And, what Jan was saying about, I find myself in the same situation where, I'm at a convention or somewhere and I'm playing a game, and I've been to a board game shop, and I've always felt welcome. I've been to the point where everybody at the table that we're playing the game have felt welcome. But I do notice that when I look up and you just take a step back, you realize you're the only one there. I know my first ever convention was PAX Unplugged here in Philly, and the first PAX Unplugged that was in Philly. So I remember just going there, and I went by myself. I didn't, like I said, while I have places to go play, I never really have been part of a gaming group until more recently, right? I'm the person who has the games, who seeks the games, who curates the games in my collection. And although my wife does play with me, my family does play with me, they're still super casual about it, right? It's time where I can take a game over. I bring my bags, and I'm waiting for that moment to say, hey guys, you want to play? Or, when they say, hey Jazz, what did you bring? Because they always know I have something. It's the last thing that's on their mind. We're all going to, joke around, have a good time, whatever the case may be. But it's where, we'll put on a TV, and this is culturally that I've noticed from us is, we'll put on a TV and watch a sporting event or do this, or before someone makes that gesture. Normally I'm always the first one to make that gesture. And it's always openly welcome. Right. But I always wonder what do I have to do better to introduce this, even if it's just one game, into somebody else's house outside of what they know, right?
Yep.
Because I know how much joy that $40 or $50 box has brought me and the people around the table. But what can I do better to just make one family's life a little bit different? That was honestly, that was my focus with this idea during the pandemic, was just to introduce this hobby to people and say, hey, if that other Hispanic family in my, you know, in the community, or even within my own family, or that Black family, or this, you know, if they can get just one game into their possession and play and enjoy around the table, you know, is that the start of making this hobby more inclusive? I think that us individually, we have that, you know, that responsibility. And then I also figure out, like, I personally don't know how uninclusive the hobby has been from others, right? So while I went to my first convention at PAX, I noticed that I was one of the only ones. I looked around, there wasn't many people like me. And I think there was one situation where, you know, people are holding up the, you know, looking for players type thing. So I saw that standing on the side of someone's table, and I went over and I was like, hey, you know, is anybody, you still need another player? And I knew the game because it's something I wanted to play. I looked at the player count already at the table, and they're like, oh, we're already waiting for somebody. And at that moment, I felt like uninvited.
But why hold up a sign?
But well, the sign, well, it wasn't held up. It was on the end of the table, right?
Okay.
And it wasn't like it was flipped down, because I think there's a thing where you can flip it over to the, you know, you can take it off or whatever the case may be. But the body language told me I wasn't included. But the one part of me said, oh, just giving them the benefit of the doubt, like maybe their person did just go to the bathroom, or they really are waiting for somebody. And I just kind of just went along, but I didn't get that chance to like really experience it, because I think that ambiguous moment or experience made me feel less, you know, less brave, or, you know, give me enough bravado to go to the next table that actually had someone holding up a sign. I didn't want to feel any letdown. So I just kind of just stood back and just walked around. You know, I enjoyed myself. I had a great time. There were people that did invite me to the table at certain points, or, you know, when I was demoing games at the during the convention. So I experienced that, but I always question myself, and I question the hobby in general. Like, what is the reason we don't have more people? Is it because, while it's a primarily, you know, white culture, you know, like most things are in America, right? You know, is it because we have not been welcomed in from a sense of how games are designed, how games are, you know, marketed towards us? Is that where that's the blocking point, to the point where, like, we outside as a culture, whether it be Hispanic, Black, Asian, whatever the case may be, or from the outside looking in, like, man, I would really like to be a part of that community, but nothing has said, hey, come in yet. There's nothing that's been welcoming enough for me to take that jump. You know, sometimes we have to be on the inside pulling people in. I think that's where we're at, pulling people in. I think there's not enough diversity in the sense of board game design, where it's like, when you look at it, there's not enough representation from me just looking from the outside in, right? Whether it's designers or content creators, or, you know, the theme of the game, or the whatever the case may be. I think that needs to be better for us to be willing to jump in. But I also think people from in the hobby need to start pulling people in as well. No matter what color they are, you know, that's just me.
You know, I think with what you're saying, because it's really hard, you know, because you said, you know, I don't know if maybe they did have somebody, you know, coming and stuff like that. Like, maybe that was genuine, right?
Yes.
But a way to make you feel welcoming, be like, hey, but, you know, we have somebody else, but you're welcome to hang out and like watch us play, or, you know, do you like whatever. There was another way to go about it, right? That, and again, maybe it's not that you weren't welcome, maybe they were shy, but when you get that sort of rejection, it makes it harder to come back in, because you're like, oh, I don't want to do that again. So, you know, when you take that little small step to be brave and courageous and approach a table that doesn't look anything like you, And that happens. Sometimes you're like, oh, well, every other table looks the same, so every other table is probably going to react the same. So I think that's the problem with that. And I know, Netters, I don't know about you, but as a woman, that's a whole other layer, right? So you and I are not just Latin women, like Latin, we are also women. So it's even harder, right?
Yes.
Because we have the thing of like, oh, it's a bunch of dudes, and there could be like half of them could be Latin, but they're all dudes. So if we go in and you get rejected the same way, where they're like maybe a little standoff, you're like, I don't want to do it again. So when you go into other groups, like I've now with the playtesting groups, I've done a few different ones. I was a moderator at Break My Game as well. And when you go in and you're the only one there that's Latin or it's a woman, it makes it intimidating to stay. Yeah. And that makes it that much harder. I know I was intimidated when I went there and I was asked to be a moderator. And it was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do it. Everyone else is a white dude and everyone's super nice. And that's not to say that, but it just makes it hard to stay. And you have to be courageous enough to keep pushing to be there. So it's hard to be in the hobby because you're not there. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean,
completely.
This word is coming up a lot, nice. And I think that nice is more complicated than some people want it to be, in the sense that okay, how can we be more inclusive? Let's just be nice. And, if everybody's nice, then we'll all get along. And, when there's like a bunch of in-group together and we all nice to each other, then it works out. But if it's in between groups, right? Now you have different people coming in, the Blacks and the Asians and Latinos and women and, LGBTQ, then like things can kind of like get communicated that even within the nice. So it's like, well, I'm nice. I'm not a racist. I'm not this, I'm not that. It's like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like, there's another level beyond just niceness that probably needs to happen. Right. There's like an active welcoming and an active kind of like celebration. It's like, not only do I just want anybody, like I want somebody who is a female. I want somebody who has the beautiful Mexican accent, my friend down there. To actively celebrate that. It's like, okay, now I'm going to be, I'm going to be with this person, with that person. And like niceness doesn't have that active kind of celebration of difference. And I guess that's kind of something I wanted to celebrate on my channel, like an active celebration of difference. But I'm sorry, the word nice triggered me. I don't know if
I totally get it.
No, I didn't know if Netters had a response to I didn't want to be that guy stepping on the woman's perspective. I just wanted to get
it is an extra barrier that we have to go through. Like, not only like if you, for example, go to a table and you are rejected or these thoughts go through your head. Like, was it because I'm a woman? Was it because I'm Latino? Was it because I don't look like them? Like, what is it? And then this is like something that we have to deal with, and carry on our shoulders. Yeah.
You'll hear a lot of like, oh, they'll take it personal. It's fine. But like, if it happens frequently enough, then you can't help it.
Yeah. And I think you hit it on the ball where it's just like, if one table does that and you look around and all the tables look the same, like you just put one and one together and you think, well, this is just not for me.
Yeah. That's everyone.
And so it's just breaking that kind of barrier. It's not about just being nice. Inviting and changing that kind of niceness or whatever is just like, just look at what you're saying to who you're saying it to. And something that could be just like, no, we already filled in the seat, sorry about that. It's just be like, okay, we'll just do a little bit extra and say, hey, why don't you come back to the table like in an hour or two and we'll play something else. And that just completely changes the mindset of that person. And that's just like in general, like if someone wants to play a game and wants to come to your table, no matter who they are, I mean, just like be like, all right, or like, hey, sorry, like we already found our group or whatever, but just kind of like, don't leave it to that person to figure out for themselves and interpret your feelings for them.
Yeah. And I wanted to add, I think there's another layer underneath nice. And it's something that I think that I know I definitely do as a Latino. And I'm not sure if anybody else does this, pero Dereck mentioned it. And I think it might happen in more cases than just me. So first of all, I agree 100% with nice, because nice can be fake. Like you can have
Yes.
artificial nice, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, oh, we're all great. And then as soon as the person turns around, it's like, oh, that guy, you know, like you can be nice while also being a horrible person. So I 100% agree. Here's the thing that I know that I've done. I give a lot of excuses for people when they behave in ways that are not appropriate. And I don't know if that is what I'm doing to make them feel comfortable or it's what I need to do in order for me to fake my comfort in a space. Because if I were to bring this up or if I were to make this into a thing, I wouldn't be invited anymore. So I feel that at least me as a Latino, I make a lot of excuses for people when certain topics pop up or when a comment is said here. Like, for example, Dereck, you immediately said, oh, he probably didn't mean it. He was probably, it was like, it wasn't intended. And that's fine. It could be true. But I know that I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where the line is drawn between, was it really unintentional or is this just something systematic that I'm noticing? And am I allowing it? Am I perpetuating this by being nice in this way towards them as well? Right. So I don't know. I thought that was a really interesting little subtopic within the word nice too.
That's a solid.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I said that was a solid point. That's a solid point. But Dereck, finish what you want to say, because I what I have is kind of, you know, can kind of go in with that. But after that, I want to hear what you had to say.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't
No.
jump in. But you know what? Now that Jan is mentioning, it's just literally like popping in my head right now. I'm sorry for this thing, but, you know, sometimes probably, I mean, or most likely, Jan, you're right. We put a lot of excuses. And we try to take it in a positive way in our minds and be like, no, they didn't mean that, they're cool or whatever, or it's ignorance, just to still belong. So in that part, I completely retaliate. And of course, I'm not gonna mention names because, like I said, I have a lot of great friends here in the city that I play with and with their families and stuff. But there's been a constant, you know, where either with players or family members of players, where they're making comments. Even I don't have any efforts, like even you know, pushing towards the racism side, even with joking comments and whatever, that I just try to think about it like, no, they don't mean that. No, it's, you know, try to make excuses for them just because you still have the need, or I don't know if it's the need, but I guess in my case, you know, the willing, better said, to be included in that gaming group, to be included in that you know, friendship. You know, so you are completely right, Jen, with that, and I totally agree. Now that you mentioned it, it really came out to my head. And the other thing that I want to ask all of you right now, you know, where Jazz, you were saying before about, you know, how can we solve these, you know, inclusive, like to be more like in conventions where you can step up and see around and see, you know, more Latinos out there, more different, you know, people with different races out there. Then it makes me think. And I wanted to ask you guys, do you think this is a problem exclusively to US? And the only reason why I'm saying is because I listen to a lot of content creators from Spain, from Chile, from Mexico. There's some content creators that I listen from Argentina as well, mainly on podcasts. And I never have heard in any of the episodes from them talking about any of the subjects that we're talking here. And some of them, they go to SN, some of them, they come to Gen Con when it's time for conventions, but I never hear them talking about these topics of being like, you know, racial topics or less inclusive topics. So you think it's mainly a problem from US, or do you think it happens everywhere?
It depends on hobby. It depends on who you ask. Look, if you ask a European, I've gotten these comments. The Americans are hyper racialized. You talk about race all the time. It's exhausting. It's this. You come over here and, you know, we're just citizens or we're just this. And, you know, like, I mean, you know, I feel that we're causing trouble, you know, like this is too much, you know, we're troublemakers. And so then my response to that would be, you know, what Jan was saying about like, what if in those other countries, other minorities feel the same way, but they're shut down harder? You know, so like, it's not a problem over there, but like, okay, ask a Muslim who's in France, or ask, you know, a Somalian refugee who's coming into Norway. Like, do they feel like they can say things, you know, or are they have that kind of like that pressure to say, that pressure to behave? So then I mean, so obviously I have have a bias, and I think I know the answer, but I just kind of want to say that, I mean, I'm open to, other folks. Maybe we are being troublemakers. Maybe we are like, kind of saying stuff, but I just don't think so, because, you go into these other countries, you try to represent different perspectives and other places over there and see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, do you get immediately shut down as an American troublemaker, or is there like a new, Palestinians, they have a very special place in my heart. Try to talk about Palestinian issues in, certain contexts and everything. And, I'm going to try to be, I'm going to get myself in trouble if I keep on talking, but just to kind of answer that particular question. But Jazz, you had something to say that before.
Yeah, I think it's just what I had to pretty much just 100% agree with both Jan and Dereck, is that like, I find myself to the point where, is my reason for giving someone the benefit of the doubt because I've just been so used to giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Right. That pressure. Exactly.
Like I said, I grew up a jock. So I grew up, with parents who were heavy. My mother was super, while she didn't finish high school, until later on in life, she was very book smart, academics, and she pushed it. And, while I did some things in school and I always was, might have not got selected for this or not got selected for that. And I used to just give the benefit of the doubt. Oh, maybe I just didn't do good enough, or maybe I just didn't do this. Like, is this just something that systemically became an excuse that you had built up inside, and then it just translates with you everywhere? I do think to some extent, yes. In other cases, no. But yeah, I think to some cases, yes. And, how do we, navigate around those avenues? I think sometimes as people from the outside, who like you said are being more that we're getting those feelings from, like, when Estefania and Netters were saying that, there was definitely different responses that they could have given. Do we as just people in general have to be more conscious about how we respond to scenarios to not give that person that that sense of giving the benefit of the doubt in the situation? If we as people can be more, cautious in how we interact with others, and be more direct in certain situations, I think that does help. I know myself included. I have to be that way. I've noticed as I've gotten older, I've gotten wiser. I'd like to think so, right? But there's certain things that I've, checked myself on, and I've had to. My wife has had to check myself on, and she's been like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. That could be deemed as, a racial type comment. And I'm like, for real? It's just because, and this is, I'm being honest. Like, one thing I've always said is transparency breeds authenticity. And if I can't be transparent in where I failed, then what the heck am I doing here? Right. So I'm gonna be honest. Like, I've had comments where I've said certain things and certain jokes, whether it be culturally or this and that. And, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to say what I've done. All I know is that I've had to work hard to correct myself and be better in, because I know that even those things, while we may take it as oh, they didn't mean it that way, or it was just a joke, or those underlying racial issues or bias issues become so ingrained in us that, we just accept them and say, oh, they just are what they are. And this is not just one race to another. This is within race, within ethnicities, because I myself, as as a Puerto Rican, listen, I've gone and grown up, and while I am more in the middle, right, got more of that Taino type skin, right, skin tone, is in Puerto Rico, and Jan could probably speak on this better than me, but I know people who are like, listen, we don't, those people, they're just darker than us, right? And I'm not going to say the terms that they use for people who are darker, or the people who are lighter, the people who are in the middle, right? And there's that interwar, their interbattle, and you don't, even within cultures, like, why did you marry him? Or get with him? He's a little bit darker. Is he black? And no, he's not. He's Puerto Rican. Like that. Like, you get that from Hispanic, grandparents, right? Oh, is he black? And you're like, no, he's Puerto Rican, or he's Dominican, or something like that. And you get, oh, okay. Like, within our ethnicity,
checking it, yeah,
right? They're just checking it, and I think a lot of times we think everything black and white, right? The black people don't like the white people don't like the black people, but then we're in the middle and we're like, listen, we got Puerto Ricans that don't like black people. We got Puerto Ricans that don't like white people. We got Puerto Ricans that don't like other Puerto Rican people. It's something that has just been ingrained with us throughout history, throughout all the things that we've dealt with, and how do we as people be better?
Some of the biggest pushback. So people know at this point, I have a big problem with the game Puerto Rico, and I had my whole thing about like, how do you do it better? And some of the biggest pushback I got was from Puerto Ricans who are like, don't take my game away from me. You're seeing stuff that's not there. And I mean, yeah, this is totally, like this, why such a squishy kind of conversation that's going all over the place. Hopefully people can kind of take out some threads. But yeah, I mean, we're not just talking black and white. We're talking like all the race relations. That's a very, very good point.
Yeah, I think it also exists like in the States more predominantly because it's a systemic issue that, it's an immigrant nation, and lots of people immigrate here from all over. And a lot of people also immigrate and are silenced and don't have the voices. And we're hearing a lot of those people now, coming out with these whole like social justice issues like Black Lives Matter, and immigration in the United States has been an issue for the longest time. But just like a lot of those people never really had the voice and they never really said anything just because it was something that, giving the other person the benefit of the doubt, and that translate down, not just throughout the whole states, but down to the table, where you're sitting at a table and you're giving the other person a benefit of the doubt for their response. And you're not sure how to interpret it, but the only way you know how to interpret it is from learned cases where you just don't say anything, you just walk away, and and that's not inviting either. So I mean, a lot of it does translate to the table, regardless if you wanted to or not. And so I think it's just something we just have to kind of be aware of and just kind of consciously take it in and think about it when you go to these events, whether it being a gaming event or something, just like be conscious, and of who you're surrounding yourself with, who you want to play with, and just like be inviting and try not to make any comments to offend anyone. And that's as easy as it can be.
Yeah. And inviting is not the same as nice.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
And Jason always uses the term about, you say, be better, we have to be better, and I think that's what it is. I think it's people as a whole, right? You have to look back on the inside and say, how can I be better as a person to help that situation? And, I know I've been trying to be better at those things or do better in those situations for my own sake and how I interact with people, but I'm hoping that others do the same as well, and I think that's where we're going to progressively, it's going to be slow, but it's a slow progress, right? Because it wasn't like we didn't just get to where we're at now overnight, right? So
there's
something.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Estefania.
Sorry. Something that I really like to do, and this is not just in gaming scenarios, it's just in general when when I went to school, when we go to parties and stuff like that, especially when somebody approaches, you can tell sometimes people are shy, what I do to try to communicate and engage with people and have them feel welcome, I like to ask them about them. Have them talk about who they are, and you can kind of see the brightness in the person coming out, because they feel they're like, oh, I'm being heard, like someone cares about who I am, someone cares about what I do, and usually through those conversations you'll find something to connect with, whatever it is. You're like, oh my god, my mom is from blah blah blah, or there's this person. And so I feel like when you're in those kind of spaces, when you don't know people and stuff like that, there's ways to connect with people in order to make them feel more welcome. And again, it's not just in gaming, just in general, because when you feel welcome in anything, you can be welcome in everything. So I think that's also really important. And like you said too, it's not just like, I'm not saying like white people connect with us. It's just like from race within itself. I'm from Argentina. There's plenty of racist people there. There's plenty of immigrants there who are racist against them. This is not just like here in the United States. There's like plenty of things that I've experienced even being over there. So it's not just about like a race, like a white against this or black against this. It's about welcome everyone. Welcome anyone who looks like you, who looks different than you. Talk to them, find out who they are. And that's what makes you feel welcome.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna we could be here forever. So I mean, I think this is a good point, but this is how we ended the last panel, Ellen. This one, Estefania had a very specific kind of recommendation for how to make quote unquote do better, as you said, Jazz. You know, but I don't like to leave it at like do better in caps and then just like figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, so like Estefania had a really good, you know, suggestion. So I'd like to ask everyone on the panel if they had like one thing. Like when you see that, when you hear that phrase, do better, whether it's like what can I do better, what the gaming do better, like what is one way that which we could think of in terms of us moving the ball forward for a truly multicultural space. So you know, I know I'm putting people on the spot, but if anybody has a specific thing that they'd like to see out there.
I'd like to see like conventions kind of reach out to like these communities, like boys and girls clubs or something like that, and invite them, give them free passes, invite like the kids in these inner-city communities and like have them present at the conventions, because that's what's going to pique interest with the children. That's going to pique interest into their family homes. And that's what's going to invite their families and stuff to bring their kids here. Oh, you know, they go home and they say, oh, I had a great time at this convention, you know, and the parents will be involved, you know, because their children likes this thing. And it's like safe. It's a safe thing to do. It's not like they're in the streets or whatever, but it's something that the convention goers, like the convention organizers can do. And it's such an impactful thing for our community as well.
Okay. Anybody else have a do better, a specific recommendation for that they can think of? I don't want to put people on the spot, so Fido.
So one thing that I'm not 100% sure if it's a do better, but it is what pops up in my mind is to ask why, like just things in general, just ask why and don't get defensive when you hear the answer is the thing that I would do. I feel that a lot of times
defensiveness, yeah, that I feel like I'm like unplugging defensiveness like all the time.
So one of the things that we've been alluding to the entire time is that America in itself is like the biggest social experiment in history ever in terms of racial and people coming together. Like this has never been done before. So it's really easy for Europeans to say like, oh, we don't care about race. Sure, dude, because you don't have you don't have as much things going on. You don't have the melting pot that we do over here. So the reason why these topics pop up so often is because this is a really unique thing.
Or they had the melting pot, but it's melted already. Like
exactly.
We're talking about thousands of year-old civilizations. So it's like now there is a French, and now there is and now they're going through it again with the European Union. But you know, whatever. But like, there's always like that kind of baseline. In America, there is no baseline. You know,
we're much
like
younger,
or it's very like, yeah, it's such a younger country. Like, you know, like you say America, some people think they know what America means, and that's not as universal as it would be among some other places.
So with that context in mind, understanding that we're all kind of going through this together, there's no point in getting defensive because we're all trying to be better at the end of the day. And like when a Latino asks you something, or you feel, or somebody feels unwelcome in a space, don't like, if your first reaction towards something is, oh, why do you feel like this? That's when you need to ask why. Mm-hmm. Why do you feel like that? And don't get defensive when you know the answer and you don't want to admit that to yourself either. Just be open to it.
A quick thing to add for what Netter said. So talking about like welcoming, like going to these communities and try to have, you know, give free passes and stuff like that so they can come. You know, there's a couple of things for that. And one of them, it was a few months ago, actually almost at the start of the pandemic, which was like 7 years ago. I don't even know at this point. But there was this group of people, and I'm not going to say who, but like what the name of the group was, but mostly white people, and it was white women. They were trying to be like, how can we invite the community more in, how to make it more diverse? And it was the same comment. Someone was like, hey, you know, you could just try to reach out to the communities, try to reach out to schools. And then someone was like, wait, we shouldn't do that because that can be offending. Like that can be a thing where the Latin people feel offended that we're trying to reach out to them because they are lower income or whatever. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and they're like, oh, that's a good point. We don't want to offend them and that. And I was like, okay, so you were not going to reach out now to like the younger, like the, you know, the communities who are hard struggling and stuff like that. And also to that point where they're like, oh, well, maybe, you know, that's a thought. sometimes when you do reach out to those kind of community and you're like, oh, let's take the kids for the convention, the systematic part of that, right, is that those parents may not be able to take them, not because they have free passes, but because they have to work. Who's going to take the kid over there? What parent sometimes has 3-4 hours to go take the kids, right? So there's like another level, another like root problem with that kind of stuff. So it's just about like, you know, I think the same thing. I'm like, try to get to the communities, try to donate games or books to kids in schools and stuff like that, and have them, hopefully like the teachers, you know, have a day where they can do that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of layers to all of this, right? But, you know, just wanted to add that because it's like literally what happened a few months ago from what she said. So
none of these are easy. Not one of the, you know, we say stuff and everything, and there's always a context for it. But we understand that. Like, we understand it, and it's like, try anyway. Just, you know, try something, fail. You know, you invite a community, fail at it, and do it again. Don't take it as, you know, I tried it and that didn't work out. Don't, please. You know, if you truly, and I guess I'll just do mine. If you truly want a multicultural space, it has to be more than being nice. Has to be more than, like, you can't just like be diverse. You have to love diversity. And when you love diversity, you have to be willing to get some egg on your face. You have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to, you know, like quote unquote offend people. But if you really love it, then you will get that forgiveness. I know people like, oh, cancel culture, you guys don't have forgiveness. You guys just, you know, want to, it depends on the spirit. It really does. And if you have a good spirit about it, then make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes myself, and I will make more. And, you know, but I love this. I love your accent, Dereck. We come back to that because I want to emphasize that I love diversity, and I'm just willing to just go at it and figure it out until it, you know, till we can really make some good progress. So,
and
one more comment. I'm so sorry. Oh, go ahead, Dereck.
No,
you go first. I've said plenty.
No, go. You have.
No.
Go ahead.
We're so nice. We're so nice.
Okay.
Go, Stephanie. Go ahead.
Just a quick comment was that, you know, if you go into a gaming space or whatever space it is, work, and if you're the first one there, you have to, this is how I tell myself, I have to try to have the courage to stay, because the next person is going to have an easier time. And I'm not thinking, I try not to think about that. I try to think of like the next person's going to have an easier time. It's hard for me, but just try to do it, try to push through whatever problem there is, right? Like whatever I feel, whatever, you know, me being alone, me being the only woman, me being the only Latin one, the next person's going to have an easier time because you're there. And the person behind that is going to have an even easier time because there's two of you. So if you can have the courage to stay and to go forward with these groups and whatever situations, the person behind you is going to have an easier time. And that's what matters, making it easier for the next generation, making it easier for who is not there yet.
Go ahead, Dereck.
Go, Dereck.
The only thing that I would like to add is, I guess, another idea that I always try to push towards, and this of course relates to what Estefania was mentioning, and also Annette, you know, how to be more inclusive in our industry. I always said this on my podcast multiple times. Please, if you are just having that doubt, you know, of creating content, yes or no, because you are different, I guess, let's put it that way, please just do it. And in this panel that we're talking about Latinos, please, if you're a Latino, we need more content creators. We need more, you know, more people that want to be involved. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the companies in the industry will support as well. So please do that. And the other thing is that if you see me in a convention, or I'm pretty sure if you see one of us in a convention, and you're also, you know, like, oh, it's a Latino, please reach out to us. And I'm pretty sure that all of us will be very happy to sit down, roll some dice with you, play some amazing games, and have a great time. And this panel has been fantastic. All of you, is very interesting to hear from all of you and all where you came from and all the stuff. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to keep growing, you know, as a Latino community on the board game industry. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
Except for Roberto. Poor Roberto.
He left, but that's okay. We will pardon him.
Except for him. Yeah. Go ahead, Jazz. Do you have a one quote unquote do better item?
I don't know. I think everybody hit it on the nail, right? Like, you know, whether it's inviting groups we have inviting groups to conventions, whatever the case may be. I think we have to, as a whole, right, have to have programs for, you know, people and kids that look like us or do like, inner cities, the people where our people are, and maybe that's us being at the forefront of these programs, right? Because, if you look at just inner city schools in general, there are different extracurricular activities that kids just don't have. They don't experience things like, the basket weaving club or the, board game club, and they don't experience D&D club, they don't
walk right in there
experience
with one book and there you go. You're ready.
they don't experience these things. But if they were to experience it, yes, you might get some kickback from people, but you might have that one or two kids that have that geekiness inside that they've been hiding, right? They're, I guess, like Dereck was saying, they are that, I guess, that they call themselves the closet geek, right? They're hiding, but if they have something that can feel, even if it's that close-knit group, maybe that brings them up to be the next designer, right? To be the next Estefania, to have that, but it's got to be that, it's not just more than being the kid at the lunch table who's by themselves, and that one person has to step up and invite them to the table or go sit down with them at the table or at the board game table. We need that as well, but we need to be able to hit these markets and bring it to them. And maybe it is, donating games, maybe it's the fact of the entry level of what these games are more expensive, but it doesn't have to always be that. It can be starting off with something small. I know some of the my favorite games that I play all the time, they're under $20 games, so I know companies can help at doing this. And and I know there's content creators that are out there that I'm sure will partner with these companies to be able to help establish these groups and help establish these in schools and communities around throughout everywhere.
Okay. So at this point, we are going to close. I think we're pushing maybe like an hour, 2 hours like that, but hopefully everybody has been along for the ride who was watching this. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for, advance for any comments that you have. So I am going to, at this point, allow all of my panelists to introduce their channels. And I will have links to all their stuff in the show notes of this video show. So I'm going to start with Annette. I know you haven't created board gaming centric content in a little while, but you are active. And so where can the peoples find you and what you're putting out?
Yeah, so I'm known as Nettersplays on the internet. I have a YouTube channel, and I also have Instagram and Twitter, a little bit of TikTok, but it's mainly like my bird.
He was piping up. Okay. He's like, TikTok.
And but yeah, I mean, you can follow me there and all the content and the games that I play, as well as the American Tabletop Awards too. You can follow them. Just trying to build up this community and this awards that represent a lot of us too.
All right, Dereck, from the Solo BG podcast, he is almost celebrating 100 episodes. So congratulations, right. Felicidades for that one.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, Jason will be in one of those episodes, the special ones that are coming. So, and I would love to have all of you at one point. I know our schedules sometimes are very busy with work, life, and games, and creating content, but I would love to have one of you guys or all of you guys, or we can do it eventually on the podcast. But thank you, Jason. Yes, you can find me as a Solo BG podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's the same social media that I use for Solo BG podcast in Español. And both podcasts, you can find them on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, wherever podcasts can be found. I'm there, and I hope to see you on the other side of the speaker there as well. So thank you for everything.
Jan is just starting Cuacalope. There's not that many videos on there, but when I first saw the project, I was very, very excited. He has a video on there where he shares a little bit about himself and his personal journey, which I really, really enjoyed. So maybe tell us a little bit more about what Cuacalope is going to offer and what's happening in the future.
I'd love to. So yeah, if you're interested in what we're doing and you want Spanish focused content that also has access to the more Americanized titles and all the Kickstarters and all these things, like one of the things that I want to do in Cuacalope is start bridging gaps with games that usually wouldn't get marketed towards Latinos and market them to Latinos, right? Try to expand those borders as much as possible and try to invite everybody to the table. That's actually how I end every video. And remember, the most important thing about this, you're always welcome at our table. That's how I ended. So Cuacalope is trying to do a few things, but mainly what I want to do with Cuacalope is to show those kids, like Jazz, you touched on it exactly. Show those kids that there's another option. It's not just sports. It's not just going out and to the bar and hanging out. It's not just like being into all the things that everybody else around you is. There are more things outside of what maybe your parents are teaching you, and maybe even your friends are showing you. Like that you feel inside, you're not alone. And that's what I want to do with Quackalope. And if you're trying to look for Quackalope, you're probably going to stumble onto our main channel, Quackalope. So Quackalope is just going to have 2 little dots on top of the U. And that's how you'll try and find us. You'll get it eventually. Quackalope Spanish, you'll probably get there. But yeah, we're just trying to bridge gaps as much as possible and invite as many people as I can into this space, because this space, and as we've all talked about, is absolutely incredible.
And it can be just, all we're doing is trying to make it better. That's it. I'm not trying to take anything away. We're trying to make it better. And that's exactly what Quackalope and everybody else's channels does. So then Lobby of Hobbies is moving on. Well, I mean, like moving upwards and, continuing to kind of provide coverage of very simple, like, easy games. And your wife appears sometimes. So tell us a little about what's coming in the future.
Yeah, so everybody can find us at Lobby of Hobbies on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then on YouTube, it is The Lobby of Hobbies. The idea is just bringing games, and we ask the question, can you dig it? Like, who's the game for? How well is the theme and the art intriguing to get to the table, and then just lastly, is the game good? So I know people want to ask, want that. So we're starting, we started off with more lighter weight games to kind of be introductory to everyone, but we're going to start hitting some of the heavier titles, things like that, because again, it's about encompassing everybody, right? We don't want it to just be an introductory, because there's going to be a point at which people are going to start growing past that. So I'm just going to introduce a bunch of different types of games, Kickstarter exclusives, previews, things like that. And as well as, I just get on and just do what I call lobby talks, which is just talk about honestly anything that's on my mind. It's like I could right before putting on that camera, whatever's on my mind to talk about, it just comes and we just do it. So it's about having fun, building community. But like Jan was saying, it is about everybody being invited to the table. That's what we're all about here. And we just like, building with everybody in the community. So we would love to see you there.
And then, of course, I put this person last because they have, you're working on something that is very exciting, also very anxiety inducing. There is a, we mentioned PopCats Fighter before. So I wanted to give you a chance to, highlight what's the latest and when can we start to see it launch.
Yeah, so PopCats Fighter is my card fighting game that I've been working for the past few years. I'm hoping to launch it on Kickstarter at the end of this year. With the new job that I got, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it. But latest is going to be next year. But you can find information. You can find me on social media for PopCats Fighter at PopCats Fighter. And I have Instagram and Twitter. That's basically the most thing I'm like proactive about these days. And I have a few other games that I'm working on, but again, those will be later on.
If you could change your mind, you can change the world. So until next time, adios, amigos.